I think it's a challenge to make people love and appreciate reptiles in general.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello. Welcome back to the podcast that won't be bringing you a December episode featuring a chat from a humbug keeper, because it turns out that a humbug is not actually a type of insect. The Rossifari podcast. You know, it's probably worth noting that those jokes right there at the beginning of each interview episode are not only the worst jokes that I make most weeks. Okay, I can hear some of my listeners debating that heavily right now. But in general, they're pretty rough, and they also take longer than almost anything else that I do for this podcast, because I always forget about them. So I sit here ready to record my intro after having edited the interview and done the interview and all the cool stuff, and I'm all excited, and I start off and I start to say hello, and I realize I don't have a joke. And so I sit there, and I sit on my couch, staring around my living room, trying to come up with a dumb joke. Now, some may ask, why not cut it? But I am stubborn and determined and kind of dumb that way. So that is why. Don't you love those behind-the-scenes looks at the podcast? Not quite as interesting as when we go behind the scenes with animals, but, you know, it's something. Anyway, for those of you that have been following along, you know that this podcast has been on a bit of a journey this season. As I've been traveling to play the drums, the podcast has been coming with me. I've been interviewing people at facilities in the places I gig. It started off with a long run down in Florida, and then I headed up to New England. And after that, which we just finished, I went out on an actual tour. I spent 3.5 weeks or so on the road and hitting a different city every day. And it was a lot of fun. It was not, however, quite what I had dreamed of with the podcast. When you only have one day in a town, even when you reach out in advance and everything, sometimes it just becomes impossible to actually connect with people at the zoo or aquarium there. This happened to me a couple of times where I reached out and I heard from a facility and they were super excited and we talked about things. And then when we got to the actual day or the day before, it was quickly realized that due to staffing shortages or just, you know, vet procedures being done or whatever, that, yeah, we couldn't do it. And we could have totally done an interview another day, but I was hopping on a bus that night and heading to a different state. And so, yeah, it really didn't work out like I had hoped. But I did make some great connections for episodes down the road. And I want to especially give a shout out to the South Carolina Aquarium in Charleston, South Carolina. Even though they weren't able to be on the podcast at this time, we had a wonderful chat about it. And it was a really good, really feel-good experience. They also comped myself as well as some of the cast free visits. And so it was fun to share that passion with people that I was on the road with. And also, I was able to comp some of their staff free tickets to my show. So people got to come and see me do the drum thing, for free. And that was cool, too. So I just wanted to take a second to say thank you to everyone at the South Carolina Aquarium, especially Ashley Dolnack, who was my contact there and was so passionate and encouraging. And I love having moments like that with people in this field. An animal person who was super sweet and awesome and I loved. What a shocker. And I gotta tell y'all, while those near misses would have been fun, I did get to go and do 2 interviews at Zoo Knoxville. Now, y'all know I love me some Zoo Knoxville. And it's not just because of the amazing animals and the fact that there are so many cool red pandas there, but because of the people there. And so this week and next, you're going to get to hear from a couple of them. Actually, I'm really excited. Next week, you are going to hear from Tiffany James again. She was on episode 20, the Great Apesode, and a lot of people have told me that is one of their, if not their favorite episode. And Tiffany's in a new department at the zoo now, and so we did a whole new interview and talked about some other stuff, and she may or may not have some cool stories about traveling to Africa through the zoo's Quarters for Conservation program. I don't know, but you may or may not hear about that next week. You will. I don't know why I try to be coy with these things. It's so awkward. But anyway, that's next week. This week, I am bringing you my interview with Phil Colclough, the Director of Animal Care, Conservation, and Education at Zoo Knoxville. And I've got to say it, while that is a rather lofty title, Phil is super down to earth. In fact, he spends a lot of his time down really close to the earth because Phil is a reptile guy. And he's going to talk about that and why reptiles, and specifically snakes, mean so much to him. He's also going to talk a little bit about his role at the zoo. And, okay, so here's the thing. Phil is awesome and has done a lot. And we had roughly a half hour for our interview. It got stretched a little bit, which was super sweet of everyone involved. But this is one of those where I had the choice of either scratching the surface on a bunch of really cool things or digging deep on a few things. And I chose option 2. So this is going to be a really cool, really deep conversation about reptiles and about why people like snakes or don't like snakes. And we talk about what it's like creating and funding and figuring out and opening a brand new exhibit, which Zoo Knoxville recently did. And you're going to hear about that process in a lot of detail, and it's really cool. But I got to tell you, I could have spent an entire hour talking to Phil and not touching on any of those topics. So I'm looking forward to having Phil back on the podcast again down the road. And I'm sure you're going to be excited to hear what he has to say now and to know that there's so much more coming the next time I make it down to Knoxville. Now, along with Phil, there's another name that you need to know for this podcast, and that name is Amy Burgess. Amy is the digital media manager as well as doing public relations for Zoo Knoxville. And she got to tag along and take me to places and listen to the interviews to make sure that I didn't say terribly offensive things. And it was actually really fun hanging out with Amy for the day. And she definitely made this whole journey very easy. She was very accommodating. And she also gets involved in this interview a little bit in a way that you might not expect a PR person to be involved. You're going to get to see the behind the scenes, not of an animal exhibit in this case, but of what it's like making a podcast sometimes. And I promise you, it is in the best way. It's not like she was shutting anything down. But get ready to have a pretty big laugh towards the end of this episode, because there is a story that goes off the rails, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And speaking of things you're going to enjoy, here's an ad. Today's episode is brought to you by Daydreamers Studios. Do you have stories and expertise to share with the world? Have you ever thought about starting your own podcasts? There's no better time to start than now with the help of a trusted production partner. Daydreamer Studios is a full-service production company that takes all the stress off your plate. You can focus on creating engaging content while they focus on recording, editing, audio engineering, hosting, and publishing on 22 platforms. Log into the advanced remote system with one click, and the Daydreamer team will be on the other end, ready for you to record everything you have to say. Owned and operated by Daydreamer Network, Daydreamer Studios continues on the company's mission to empower storytellers of all kinds by making podcasting accessible to all. For more information and current promotions, visit daydreamernetwork.com/studios. All right. And along with that, here's your quick friendly reminder to make sure you're following along on social media pages at Rossifari or on TikTok at RossifariPod. You can support the pod at patreon.com/Rossifari. And the website is rossifari.com if you want to see rossifari.com type things. Okay, without further ado, here is my interview with Phil Colclough, the Director of Animal Care, Conservation, and Education at Zoo Knoxville. why don't we start off by you telling me who you are, where we are, and what you do here?
Okay, well, my name is Phil Colclough, and I am Director of Animal Care, Conservation, and Education here at Zoo Knoxville. I've been here 26 years, and right now, where are we? We are in my office.
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Check out the new nature podcast that everyone is talking about, Birds of a Feather Talk Together. If you like Radiolab or Planet Earth, you'll love Birds of a Feather Talk Together. Escape from the daily grind into the world of birds. 2 experts and 2 amateurs talk about a different species every week. Recently, we talked about the osprey, burrowing owls, roadrunners, pigeons, giant hummingbirds, house wrens, sandhill cranes, and so many more. We have a lot of fun every week. Learn more about the incredible birds around you and some that you didn't know existed. Birds of a Feather Talk Together. You're going to like these birds. I guarantee it.
Yeah, we are.
At Zoo Knoxville.
And let's just start off talking an animal right away, which is who dat? You have an animal in your office.
I do. Those are, that is Amy Burgess. No, it's not Amy Burgess. Those are, she's not even paying attention to us.
Nope, she's supposed to be listening, and she's just on her phone.
Amy, just so you know, for real, there is a copperhead and 2 timber rattlesnakes right behind you in those boxes. There's nothing going to get your shoulder. There's no air holes to get you, but just so you know, while we're talking about animals in my office, yeah, he is. So just so you know, and so you know, but
yeah, that's good to know.
Probably what you're referring to are the leopard geckos over here.
Yes.
So yeah, those are leopard geckos. It's an office pet that they're incredibly good pets as far as reptiles go. And those actually came from my son. I think he got them for his 10th birthday, and he is now almost 21. And I told him when he stopped taking really, really good care of them, they were going to come to my office, and they've been here for about 7 years.
All right. Nice. I love leopard geckos.
Yeah.
I have one. And
do you?
Just amazing
Yeah,
animals.
they're very, very cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Long lived.
Yes. But that's not actually what we're here to talk about today.
Okay.
So you have a really lofty title, and we'll get to that and what that means. But tell me about your journey to get to that cool title. What got you into like zoos and animals and all that good stuff?
So I'm one of the people that grew up to be the astronaut. You know, I'm one of the people that really have known they've wanted to do this since I was a little bitty kid.
That's awesome.
Specifically reptiles. I'm a reptile guy. You'll find that most animal people's identity is kind of tied up in one taxa of animals.
Right.
And our president and CEO is a great ape person. So I mean, she's an animal person, and her identity kind of lies with great apes. And I've been a reptile kid since really, I could say 3 years old. I remember my grandfather waking me up in the middle of the night and saying, "Hey, you need to come see something really cool on my back porch." And I came out on the back porch in Marion, Virginia, and my grandfather showed me this black rat snake that was in the chinking of the brick trying to get to a bluebird nest in his backyard on his back porch. And I thought, man, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I've got to know more about these. And then I'm from Texas, and I took care of a bunch of turtles as a kid with a friend of mine, Carol Allen, who's a sea turtle rehabber now in Houston, Texas. She is awesome. So between Carol Allen and my grandfather, those 2 people really cinched down my career goals from super, super early age. So yeah, and I did everything I could to be here throughout my life. I mean, I studied reptiles and amphibians, and that was my ultimate goal, was to be a curator of a herpetology department at a zoo. And when that happened, I had arrived, and that's what I wanted to do. And then this job came open about 8 or 9 years ago as director of animal care, and I kind of jumped into the unknown and decided to start learning about mammals as well. Instead of just feeding them to reptiles.
Yeah, they're fuzzier.
They're fuzzier. So here I am, and I've been doing this job for I think about 8-9 years, something like that. And it's great too. I love it. I love it just as much, maybe even more so than my curator or herpetology job.
Well, I noticed something. I'm going to call you out a little bit here. So, no, in a good way. Don't worry. But so you get this big highfalutin position here, and what opens up a couple years later? ARC, which is a brand new reptile center. Why do I think you had something to do with that?
Oh my gosh, I would love to take complete credit for that. I mean, no, it was it was more a reflection and a need of the facility and a reflection of the expertise currently in there in the form of, I hate to say good things about Michael Ogle, our herp curator. He hates to hear it. I hate to say it, but he is awesome at what he does. He is an incredible herpetologist, and I would blame him for that building as much as anything. We needed it. I wanted it. It was a priority, but there were so many other team members besides myself that influenced the construction of that facility. Nice. And it's kind of funny in our zoo in particular. Everybody is always wanting their own piece of the pie. I'm not saying that selfishly, but of course the tiger people want a new tiger facility. The panda people want a new panda facility. And without fail, all of the animal care department and every staff member in the zoo recognized that the ARC needed to be the next thing we did with absolute across the board acceptance. So it was a huge team effort and a huge team support from every walk of life in the zoo.
That's really awesome to hear. That's cool because it looks amazing. So I made it all the way into the first room of ARC.
where the crocs are?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I made it that far before I had to come do this interview.
Oh, cool. You got a lot more to see over there.
Yeah, I'm really excited to check it out. The last time I was at this zoo, it was a foundation.
Oh, cool.
And it looks so beautiful.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
It was really fun to see come online. I mean, it's a lot of times in the zoo world, there are architects that come in and want to make their mark with a building, and there's animal people that want to do what they want to do with a building, and unless they meet exactly in the middle over the needs on both sides, then a lot of times it doesn't work real well. And this building is the result of both sides really being knee to knee the whole time of the design, and I think you're going to see that it's pretty darn fantastic.
That's awesome, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about probably the most today is ARC, because part of this podcast is these interviews. I do one a week, and then part of it is something called Zoo News, where I do a weekly half-hour breakdown of all the zoo and aquarium news. And I've been talking about ARC since it was announced. I'm so excited to finally be here and to see it, and it's so cool.
We need a snake on the front of that computer, just for the record.
That's a good idea. I like it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I know you're calling me out for the Binturong and the red panda stuff, but hey, at least we got a turtle on there.
There's a turtle on there for sure. It's a sea turtle. A lot of times that falls in with the marine mammal people for some reason.
Fair. I'm so curious about what it's like to build a new herp house. And I know from just working with, a couple of different pets in that world, how hard it is to figure out water and temps and environment. So would you talk me through it in some detail? My listeners love nerdy stuff.
Sure.
So really tell me what it's like, and how long do you have to have exhibits set up before the animals move in, and how do you get the animals in, and all that stuff?
You got the right guy if you want to talk nerds. So as far as exhibit design is concerned, that is a really it's a real shortcoming of mine. I am not a directional person. In fact, when my wife and I built our house, I couldn't even see the rooms until the drywall was up. I mean, that's the way it is. I cannot look through and say, hey, why is there a toilet in our bedroom? And my wife would say, no, there's not. Do you not see those studs in the wall? So I'm really, really bad directionally. Kelly Cox, who's the assistant director of animal care, and our safety officer, is, on the other hand, incredibly good at that. And she's an animal person too. So we started lots and lots of meetings with the architects and with the animal people from the very beginning. And we kind of went through and decided what we wanted as a collection, what we wanted, which animals we wanted to have in there. And as you probably know, zoos are really no longer the place where you just go pay your money to see an animal in a cage. I mean, we are full-on conservation organizations, and we want people to look at habitats and learn something about the culture, the people that are there, maybe something about the botany, maybe, of course, about the animals themselves. So there's a whole lot of pieces that have to fall in place in order to get this building done. So we want to look at the conservation programs. We want to look at, we've got limited real estate in a building like this, so we really want to commit the square footage to programs that are in need of it. I mean, we recognize there are some things that people just want to see. People want to see a king cobra.
Right.
People want to see a giant tortoise. People want to see a giant crocodilian. And with our Cuban crocodiles, that's from a conservation standpoint, that's a really important animal to feature. And we're getting a really cool, giant, ferocious, beautiful crocodilian that leaps 6 feet out of the water to grab its prey. So there's a whole lot of that. I mean, as far as the facilities are concerned, so if we start with the collection plan, say this is what we want to work with, then we look at what space requirements are there, what temperature requirements are there, what water quality is there, what can we mix together? Are there a number of species we can house together to get more bang for our buck in the enclosures? We wanted to set ourselves apart from the older facility that they came from, so we want more lavishly planted, more interactive areas in the building. And that's another thing, we recognize that, I recognize that not everybody loves snakes. The funny thing about snakes, and I sound like a broken record, and I've said this a million times, snakes, reptiles kind of, but mostly snakes. If you hate snakes, you come and see snakes. If you love snakes, you come and see snakes. If you hate zebras, you really just kind of don't go see the zebras. So it's almost 100% of the people that come into our reptile facility, into the Ark, to look at those animals. So I think it's really important to exhibit species that are attractive to people, especially the non-snake people. And I realize I'm talking snakes, and there's lots of other things. And I'm a snake guy. Not only is my subset herpetology, but I'm a snake guy. It's kind of like the Ford Chevy thing with tortoise and snake people. So we wanted really brightly colored animals. We wanted animals that people could look at and say, in addition to our conservation efforts, we wanted people to be able to look at an animal and say, wow, that is not nearly as ugly as I thought it was going to be. And they can at least look at the patterns and the colors. So that's a real important criteria for building the collection, as well as the, working from a program aspect. So, and then you look at space too. What kind of space does this need? Is this an arboreal tree-dwelling animal? Is this a fossorial animal? So is the enclosure going to be high? Is it going to be short? Is it going to be rocky? Is it going to be heavily planted? Is it going to be humid? Is it going to be dry? What kind of temperatures do they need? So there are all kinds of different systems in this building that are working together to support the animals that we have. We've got some animals that really depend on cool temperatures. So we had to have a whole different heating and air system to support those animals that need it cooler, whether it be at night or in the daytime. So, you're dealing with a whole nother wing of that. So, I think the people that put the electric in that building were blown away with the needs of those reptiles and the intricacies of those reptiles and amphibians that we put in there. And that's not even talking about the people aspect of this building. I mean, the people aspect is a huge thing. We want people to have a good time while they're in there. We want people to be entertained. We want people to learn things, or maybe trick them into learning things while they're having fun. So there's a number of interactives in there that speak to the STEM aspect of that building. So we wanted a huge STEM-esque program in there. So we built a classroom where kids can go out into the wetland and put on waders and dip net out of a pond that we have out back, and bring stuff in and look under a microscope at what they found. We want the games to be fun, but we also wanted them to learn something about a reptile or amphibian while they're in there. We want our staff to be mic'd as much as possible when they're working in the greenhouse, so they can interact with our guests and talk to them about what they're doing and what they're looking at and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on about the intricacies of this building, and there's a lot more than that. Safety is a huge thing. We built switch cages into a number of these venomous snakes, and a switch cage is kind of like you do, say, a big carnivore like a tiger or a lion. You're never physically exposed. You never share the same space with that animal. And in the case of a king cobra and a green mamba, those can be pretty dangerous animals. So we built switch cages with them to where we could transfer them to a switch cage without a lot of exposure directly to the keeper.
That's pretty unique, isn't it? I have not heard of that. I mean, I know a lot of herp keepers, and I've never heard of that at a zoo.
Well, it's unique with big venomous snakes, and it's unique with mambas.
Okay.
And green mambas are incredibly fast. They're real visual. And the least amount of time you can expose yourself to them, the safer that's going to be for sure. I mean, there's going to be a time when I have to hook that animal. And by hooking means pick it up with a snake hook, which is a golf club with a hook on the end, and move it to a container to get in and service that habitat. So, but we want it to be as safe as we can. So we built switch cages, and we do training with some of these animals to make sure they know where the switch cage is, make them comfortable in that, so we can separate them from the exhibit, and that sort of thing. So, and then the life support systems of all this stuff. I mean, keeping all this water crystal clear and safe, and the chemistry involved. And we hired two full-time positions just to deal with water chemistry in other parts of the zoo that have water pumps and filtration as well, but primarily in this in the Ark.
Wow, that's really amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, it just goes on and on and on about how intricate this building was and is.
That's really cool. How long did it take to go from like starting to design to actually opening?
Oh my gosh, it's a blur. I don't know that. Do you know that, Amy Burgess? How long it took from inception and conception of that building to ribbon cutting? I mean, probably. Yep. Someone will have to fact check me on that, but yeah, 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And there's been incarnations of that building on the back of cocktail napkins for 25 years.
Right.
So you can make the argument that it's been 25 years coming. And we had some good ideas early on that we decided we want to apply to this building now too. So a long time is a safe answer.
Nice. I love that. Now tell me, what is your favorite animal in the Ark?
Oh, king cobra.
Okay.
That's super easy for me. It's, king cobra is one of those animals that every herp kid, especially every snake kid, you saw the movie and read about it. Maybe you're too young to know Ricky Tikki Tavi.
No, yeah. Trust me, my mama brought me up right.
Okay,
I know
good.
Ricky Tikki Tavi.
Good. So yeah, the cobras in that. I mean, anaconda and a king cobra are probably top list of kids' favorite reptiles.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that king cobra, and I'm a bit embarrassed because reptile people are typically biologists, and these animals are specimens,
right,
and you don't necessarily get attached to them anthropomorphically. But and I've found that to happen to me with a Komodo dragon, owl, our big tortoise, of course, and then this king cobra. I mean, I'm stupidly attached to this animal, kind of from an emotional standpoint too. It's really weird. She doesn't like me back as much.
Right. Fair.
But yeah, that's probably my single favorite animal in that collection. I mean, she is beautiful. They're visual, they're fast, they're incredibly dangerous. They have a lot of history behind them, a lot of folklore, and it's a big, gigantic venomous snake.
Yeah.
It's a really, really cool animal. So yeah, hands down, that's my favorite animal in that building. Eastern diamondback rattlesnake is my favorite animal. I didn't know if you're asking me that or not, but yeah, if we got that someday, that would fill the place of that cobra. Maybe. I don't know.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. So what do you think it is that makes you such a herp person? And I know, I mean, you talked about your history, but I know that beyond that, you can't define what it is. I know that. Red pandas, binturongs, tree kangaroos, and turtles are my 4 favorites.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense, and I don't know why. And I know the exact minute I fell in love with red pandas.
Sure.
And it makes even less sense because I'd seen them for years and never cared. And then one day I fell in love. But as much as you can, why do you think it is that you just what is it about them that connects to you?
Sure.
All right. We'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Kathy Hill from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're all about restoration projects in progress this season on One Lagoon, One Voice. Learn about the great strides the lagoon community is taking to restore and protect the Indian River Lagoon. Each week, we dive deep into discussions with scientists, resource managers, and nonprofit leaders to explore lagoon issues and solutions. From oyster reefs to clam restoration, algae blooms to muck, you'll learn all about the projects we're tackling to bring the Indian River Lagoon back to health. Click the link in the show notes to follow One Lagoon, One Voice, learn about the IRL Council, and explore our unique lagoon.
Well, I mean, let me start by saying this can't be backed up scientifically at all, but in my 51 years of life, I've seen lots of herp kids, lots of herp adults, and I swear it seems like they're born that way. I mean, I mean, it's just, I see kids come in here that are just passionate about reptiles and nothing else. And they don't seem to grow out of that. I mean, again, there's no foundation with that. And most hurt people have a lot of characteristics that from a personality standpoint that are the same. Some really, really bad and some really, really good. But
on a side note, if you're listening to this and you've ever gone to one of those like herp shows where, he's not lying.
That's a whole nother subset.
It is a unique group of individuals.
For sure. But I mean, I think the broader question is why herps, and maybe even specifically why snakes. Right. I mean, I think it's a challenge to make people love and appreciate reptiles in general. There's a lot against them from the get-go, whether that be a cultural thing or just, I found that people tend to like things more that look like themselves, right? That they can relate to more. Mm-hmm. Chimpanzees are a favorite. Great apes are a favorite with people. And I think a lot of people don't know how dangerous chimpanzees are, especially compared to a cobra, but that's a whole nother story. Sure. I just think the unusualness of snakes and the challenge of convincing people that they're here for a reason and that they're beautiful. And despite the fact they don't have any arms and legs and eyelids and don't look anything like us, there are a lot of really, really cool things about them. I mean, you can get lofty and talk about rodent control, or you can be superficial and talk about how beautiful they are. Right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, I feel like these reptile people are born this way.
Yeah, I totally get that.
It's kind of rare to find somebody working, especially professionally, with reptiles that didn't know they wanted to do it as a little kid.
Very cool. And so going along with what you were just saying, I am here today with a friend who is an aspiring zookeeper who is deathly afraid of snakes for no reason.
Sure.
How does one go about fixing that? And I will tell you, I spent over a year getting over my fear of spiders to the point that I actually was able to handle the tarantula the podcast for the first time ever. It was really cool. And now I like them. I actually love them. I wish I could hang out with more tarantulas.
Very cool.
But so I know how I did it. We talked about it on an earlier episode. But like for my friend Megan, what do we do? How do we get her over this fear?
Right. I think it's information as much as anything. I mean, I think they're so foreign to us. And there's so much mystery around them and maybe a lot of misinformation. Mm-hmm. Snakes don't chase you. There's not a single snake on the planet that will chase you, but that's a misnomer.
Right.
Even venomous snakes aren't there to bite you and envenomate you. I mean, their venom is for food getting. It's really more a food getting mechanism than it is a defensive measure. Mm-hmm. But I just think exposing people to that, and I think being real respectful of that fear is an important thing too. I mean, I understand it's a real thing. I mean, I've known some people that are deathly afraid of butterflies. I've known some people that are deathly afraid of frogs. I'm not.
That's amazing.
Somebody on our leadership team here is deathly afraid of frogs.
Wow.
I learned a couple of weeks ago, and I think. I just think you tiptoe into it and you're very respectful of it. You maybe find out where that fear comes from. A lot of times it's founded on a big brother that did something awful to you with a snake.
Sure.
I hear that story a lot. Yeah, I hear, one time my brother, or I was walking through the woods and I stepped on one, or, usually kind of dig around and find out what made them afraid to begin with. I think everybody is salvageable when it comes to snakes. I mean, it's a weird fear and it's a weird bias. I always tell people it's odd to me, especially when I was the herp curator, that throughout any given summer, there's 3 or 4 snakes that are brought to our front gate with their heads cut off for us to identify. And they bring it and they call the herp person and say, "Hey, I brought this headless dead snake that I killed in my backyard and I want you to identify it." And it's so foreign to me that they come to a zoo where people, obviously that person that's going to come see that snake loves these more than anything on the planet, or they wouldn't have committed their whole career to it, but they don't bring headless birds to the bird curator.
Right.
I mean, that's a real weird thing to me. I mean, I know there's a difference somehow. And I, if someone brings me a headless snake, I'm not going to preach to them and yell at them and be rude to them by any means. But I mean, I will do my best, because those are obviously the people that are afraid of the snakes. Mm-hmm. I will do my best to talk to them and say, "Hey, this is maybe why you shouldn't do it." And 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, it's a harmless snake.
Right.
That they think, on the other hand, is a copperhead or a cottonmouth or a whatever.
That's such an interesting experience that you've had.
It happens pretty regularly. I mean, it really does. And even here on zoo grounds, we have, we've got a pretty healthy population of snakes on zoo grounds on our campus here. Not a single venomous snake has ever been found on Zoo Knoxville grounds. But there are a bunch of black rat snakes because we have a bunch of chipmunks. We have a bunch of rodents. I mean, that's just what happens when you have public and garbage and food and animal food and that sort of thing. So they're here kind of cleaning up some of those rodents. And throughout the summer, we'll get 15 or 20 black rat snakes that are just laying out on the pathway.
Oh, wow.
And all hands on deck on the radio. Hey, there's a snake out on the pathway, but you don't get the all hands on deck when there's a chipmunk sitting on a fence post. And again, I understand there's a difference. I'm poking fun a little bit, but there still is a difference for some reason.
Yeah, no,
and it's a good opportunity to go down and talk to people and say, hey, this is one of our native black rat snakes. It can get 6 feet long. It's incredible for keeping rodents under control, thus keeping disease under control and food storage under control and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of weird biases towards snakes.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And as somebody who's always quite enjoyed them, I don't get it. Although, like I said, I was also an arachnophobe for a long time. It also made no sense. And I knew that logically.
Sure.
But,
Yeah, my mom has historically not been a snake person. I mean, she doesn't love snakes. And
I hope that's not her Tupperware over there.
That is not her Tupperware over there. Although a few pillowcases and Tupperware containers over the years of my childhood have gone to the snake effort. So, I mean, back to your question, how do you get people over it? I just think it's exposure. I think it's finding some really cool facts to talk to them about. Maybe show them some beautiful snakes. Maybe they've never heard that there's a function of snakes. This is why they're here on the planet.
Makes sense. Do you think meeting one like handling or petting or anything helps?
I do think that. I think exposure to them. A lot of times when people are afraid of snakes, they've been surprised by one. Mm-hmm. There's been one in their carport that they almost stepped on. There's been, a horrible movie that they saw about them. Gotten into their bluebird boxes and eaten their bluebirds, which happens. Yeah. I mean, that happens quite a bit. But I think direct exposure is good. Respectful direct exposure.
Yes.
I would never force somebody to touch a snake. I would never force somebody to be in the same room with a snake if they didn't want to. So it's kind of tiptoeing into that comfort zone. Right. And maybe next time they're around, maybe they want to get a little closer. It's funny too, because it seems that most people are more afraid of small snakes than they are giant snakes. Seems people are more comfortable with a great big boa constrictor than they are a little garter snake. I don't know if it's because it's more visual. You can kind of see where that animal is moving a little more. It moves a little more slowly. I don't know what it is, but that's a thing too for whatever reason.
Huh. Interesting. Very cool. So, tell me, so animal care we know about, everyone does, but you have part of your title is conservation. And I am such a lover of conservation efforts and the stuff that zoos do. And one of my big things that I always try, whenever I get to talk to anybody who's in a position of power, like you, I'm always like, oh, hey, by the way, my mission.
Everybody laughs.
But my one of my big missions with this podcast, as far as mostly it's sharing what y'all do with other people, but also trying to encourage any zoo people I talk to share the conservation stuff that they do more, because every day it seems like that I go to a zoo. I'll go to some behind the scenes area and they'll be like, see this little shack here? This is one of 3 places where we're breeding this species, which is keeping them from extinction, blah, blah.
Sure.
And then I get on Instagram and it's like, here's the 400th picture of a bear. And bears are awesome, and I get it.
Sure.
But also, like, tell me about some of the conservation stuff going on here that maybe people aren't as aware of, but that is super cool.
Sure. There's going to be a little bit of a bias towards reptiles again, towards me, but I think, bog turtles.
Which I love, by the way.
A bog turtle is one of the rarest species of turtle on the planet. They occur right here in East Tennessee. It's kind of a brown little ugly turtle, if truth be told. People always argue with me about that, but I mean, there's not a whole lot to them. They got a beautiful yellow patch behind their eyes, but they're real habitat specific. So I'm telling you to tell you this, that behind the scenes, we've been working with bog turtles for 26, 27 years. We're actually re-releasing bog turtles back into the wild. Through habitat destruction and through poaching, bog turtles have declined in their natural range by an incredible number. So we're actually hatching these, growing them up for a year or two and re-releasing them back into the wild. It's a project that's really cool because most bog turtle habitat, at least in East Tennessee, occurs on private landowners' land. So when we started this project, Bern Tryon, who is no longer with us, he started this project at Zoo Knoxville 28 years ago. And he identified these habitats on private land and went to the landowners and said, hey, you guys have perfect habitat for bog turtles. There's none here for some reason. Maybe they were poached, maybe whatever. We would like to start an introduction program where we're breeding these in captivity and putting them back on your land. So immediately these people are like, oh, great. I'm going to have an endangered species on my land. I can't do what I want to on my land. The government's going to come take my land. So there's a whole human aspect of that project from the very beginning where you go to them and make them comfortable and say, hey, these turtles are so important. We want you to love these turtles. We want you to support these turtles. We are not the government. We're your friends. We want to show you what's in your backyard. And here we are 20-something years later, we've got these private landowners with these bogs in their backyard. And not only are they not afraid of us anymore, they are some of the biggest bog turtle fans that we have on the planet. In fact, if some truck or car drives by their land a little too slowly, they'll be on the front porch with a shotgun guarding that land. I mean, they've gone from being afraid of us to being afraid of somebody that might come steal these turtles. And in many cases, this land is secured for their future generations. They've told their kids, hey, when I'm gone, I want you to protect this land for these bog turtles. So that's a huge conservation effort we're doing. And that's the one I think I'm most proud of from a whole zoo standpoint. But we've sent keepers all over the world. I mean, we've got a project here called Quarters for Conservation, where a number of there's a quarter for every person that comes through our gate that goes to a huge fund, and we let our staff, not just keeper staff, it's all staff in the zoo, put in professional development opportunities, and they say, hey, I would like a piece of this money to go to Africa to help with a penguin recovery project, to go with Southeast Asia to help with Malayan tiger project, to donate to the bog turtle program or whatever. So we have all kinds of little smatterings of conservation through our projects, through our employees that just are passionate about doing it. I mean, bog turtles kind of get the headlines around here. Our tigers get headlines, red pandas. That's one of our hallmarks. There's. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's one, you probably know more about red pandas than I do.
Probably, yeah. And I did an interview with Sarah Glass, and the entire episode is just us talking about the captive red panda population and nerding out because we both know so many of them.
Yeah,
and
very cool.
It was very cool, very embarrassing all at once, but I loved it.
Yeah, Sarah's the red panda queen.
Yes. I literally felt like I was meeting a celebrity.
You were.
The first time that I met her, I was like, oh my goodness.
You were.
It's happening. Yeah.
The most important celebrity in the zoo until today. When you met Amy Burgess over here.
Who is paying attention again. So we're doing
She is. I'm going to have to watch what I say from here on out because I can see she's looking at me.
So are there any external conservation organizations that you'd like to give a shout out to? Maybe some cool herp things that you support?
The Nature Conservancy has worked with us. The TSA, the good TSA, not the bad TSA. So yes. Turtle Survival Alliance.
Love Turtle Survival Alliance.
I know. I'm gonna get thrown against a wall next time I go to the airport.
You're not flying anywhere anytime.
That's true. The Ruaha project in Africa that we work with, some of our Q4C money goes to them for many things through that. Specifically, human lion conflict resolutions. A number of things all the way across the board.
Okay, very cool. And then I don't want to keep you too long, although I feel like we could talk all day. You have some stories, my friend. But so I think it's time.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
I've got lots of poop stories.
Poop story.
But many of them I absolutely can't tell. I'm still kind of at a loss. We've eaten lots of really gross things.
Okay, tell me about eating some gross things.
We've tried mealworms.
Oh.
We've tried waxworms.
Oh.
We've tried monkey biscuits. I know a guy that actually ate a frozen Pinky Mouse.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, why would you? How can you? What?
That's another herp thing. I mean, you just can't not take a dare.
Oh my gosh! I mean, I can understand. Like, have I tried a zoo biscuit or two? Yeah, it's been known to happen. Has Zupreme been offered to me later this week, and I'm going to try it? Yes, I am. But
keeps you regular.
Pinky.
Yeah, a frozen Pinky Mouse. There was no live Pinky.
Of course,
Pinky
of course.
Mice.
I still want, but now that's the poop story.
Poop story.
I want, because I want to know what it was like pooping out.
I was going to say the poop story is the next.
It's time for interrupting John.
And then, y'all, one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me in an interview happened. Amy, who, again, is the PR person, is the person who is supervising the interview, suggested that Phil tell a story that he did not want to share, per se. And this was all hilarious and very funny, but you have to hear how this went down. I cut out all mentions of what the story is actually about. Sorry, but my word is my bond, and I have to respect and protect the people that I'm interviewing. But I think this is going to crack you up without knowing that. And yes, in case you are wondering, they did end up telling me the story off the record. So y'all should be jealous, and I should get back to Knoxville so that we can get this story on the pod next time. Enjoy.
I can't tell that story because much of the zoo does not know that story.
Oh, really?
You are one of the select few that knows that.
Okay, never mind. Scratch that.
I will tell you after you hit stop on this.
Fair.
That's the grossest thing.
That truly, that actually went through my head.
heard.
That actually went through my head, and I was like, do I expose this thing right now? You can tease it a
Okay.
little bit, but I'm not telling you what it is.
Okay.
It'll leave people hanging, and maybe next time he visits, I'd be willing to share to share the story.
I
Poop.
like it.
Why would you not share it? Why do people not know
It is so weird.
it?
And it's-
so weird.
And there's been so much effort gone into it over the last 15 years.
And people would hear it and they'd be like, wait, you guys did what?
No, I'm not telling it.
Oh my goodness.
There's too many people on the team that I'd have to get their permission before I exposed it.
This is amazing. I've never had the PR person be like, tell a story, and the guest be like, no. Normally, the PR person is the one waving their arms and making faces.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I can think of one where one of our animal departments that I'm not going to name
Okay.
was asked to leave Shoney's because they smelled so bad. There are groups of animals that people work with that you go home smelling like those animals sometimes, and it was disturbing apparently to the Shoney's crowd of all people. Now I'm bashing
hilarious.
Shoney's. I'm not bashing Shoney's.
No, of
I
course.
love their
No.
breakfast bar.
Plus, their cheese soup is amazing.
Oh, that is good. That is good. Yeah, so they were asked to leave Shoney's because they smelled so bad.
That's hilarious. No, yeah, I have a keeper friend who has told me repeatedly she works with Manduas.
Oh yeah, of course.
And
That's
she
a
said
bad one.
She will get home. And there was one time that she got home and stripped naked for her husband. And he was like, go take a shower. And she was like, this is killing the mood.
That is funny.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. I do appreciate it.
Sure.
It's been a lot of fun.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you coming.
All right, y'all. So I'm just going to say it. Yes, I got to hear the story after all of that. And yes, it was weird and gross and funny. And I'm going to do everything in my power to get that story on my podcast eventually. So, yeah. Sometimes I've mentioned this on here before in different ways, but the things that I am told and the things that I hear and the experiences that I get to have because of this podcast that don't make the podcast because, reasons, either the ones that you just heard or whatever, I have a very, very weird life, and this podcast is very much a part of that. And I love it so much. If you want to hear more about Zoo Knoxville or check out the various animals and other things there, you can do that by hitting up zooknoxville.org or at Zoo Knoxville on all the social medias. And I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, PJ Bevan and Laura Shank. Thanks, guys. Yay. All right, and a quick reminder, friends, the word Steiderk backwards is credits. Whoa, that was weird. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Vesley Gross. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.